March forward! Take the city!
Victory!
They said no woman could rule the battlefield until Queen Amina arrived. Before Nigeria existed, before colonial borders divided Africa, one warrior queen conquered kingdom after kingdom across the Hausa lands with fire, blood, and fear. Her enemies called her a monster. Her people called her unstoppable. And by the time the war drums fell silent, an empire belonged to her. The night smelled of smoke, sweat, and blood. Far beyond the towering clay walls of Zazzau, a kingdom burned beneath a moon hidden by black clouds. Horses thundered across the earth like rolling storms, while terrified villagers fled into the forests, carrying children on their backs. Then the war drums stopped, and silence fell. Not the silence of peace, the silence of fear, because she had arrived. At the front of 20,000 warriors sat a woman clad in iron-studded leather armor, her face stern beneath layers of dust from battle. A curved sword rested against her thigh, while her horse pawed violently at the ground. No trembling, no hesitation, only cold patience. The enemy king stared from the gates of his collapsing city with disbelief burning in his eyes, because the stories were true. The conqueror destroying kingdom after kingdom across the Hausa lands was a woman. Her name was Queen Amina of Zazzau, and before the night ended, another kingdom would belong to her. Long before colonial maps carved Africa into borders, before Nigeria existed as a nation, the lands of the Hausa kingdoms thrived through trade, warfare, politics, and ambition. Among those ancient kingdoms stood Zazzau, a powerful city-state positioned near critical trade routes connecting West Africa to the vast Sahara Desert. Merchants traveled for months carrying salt, leather, gold, spices, and slaves across dangerous deserts just to reach its markets. And in the royal palace of Zazzau, sometime during the 16th century, a child was born who would one day terrify nearly every neighboring kingdom. Amina, daughter of Queen Bakwa of Zazzau. From birth, Amina was different. While noble girls learned court customs, marriage rituals, and palace etiquette, Amina spent her days watching soldiers train in the dusty courtyards. She admired the sharpened spears, the cavalry formations, the discipline of warriors who stood beneath the blazing northern sun without fear. By the age of 16, she was already riding horses with military escorts. By 18, she reportedly understood battlefield strategy better than many commanders twice her age. Some palace elders whispered that the girl possessed the spirit of a man. Others called her dangerous. But her mother saw something else: leadership. Queen Bakwa ruled Zazzau during a period of rising prosperity. Under her authority, trade expanded and the kingdom grew wealthy. And Amina watched everything: how alliances were formed, how rivals lied, how kingdoms betrayed one another over trade routes, how power truly worked, not through kindness, but through strength. When merchants from distant lands arrived in Zazzau, they often noticed the young princess standing beside military leaders instead of sitting with royal women. She asked questions no one expected. How many soldiers defend Kano? Which kingdoms are fighting among themselves? How much tax is collected from caravans? The men laughed at first, until they realized she remembered every answer. And years later, she would use every piece of information. When Queen Bakwa died, the throne passed to Amina's younger brother, Karama. That decision angered many warriors, because among the people, Amina had already earned respect as a fierce military commander. But tradition favored male rulers, so Amina did not protest, at least not openly. Instead, she accepted command of Zazzau's cavalry. That decision would change African history forever. For nearly 10 years, she led military expeditions under her brother's reign. And during those campaigns, she transformed into something terrifying. Not merely a warrior, a strategist. She studied enemy movements with obsessive precision. She learned how long armies could survive without water, how fear spread through villages before battles even began, how starvation could defeat kingdoms faster than swords. Her soldiers became fiercely loyal because, unlike many royals, Amina fought beside them. She rode into battle herself. She bled with them. A surviving oral tradition claims that during one brutal conflict, an enemy spear struck her shoulder. Instead of retreating, Amina reportedly pulled the spear free and continued fighting while blood soaked her armor. Whether true or partly legend, stories like that spread rapidly. Soon, neighboring kingdoms began hearing whispers. The Princess of Zazzau was becoming unstoppable. And yet fate handed her the throne. After King Karama's death, Amina became ruler of Zazzau. Everything changed. The moment she took power, diplomacy ended. Conquest began. The first kingdom she invaded believed the rumors were exaggerated. They thought no woman could command a massive military campaign. They were wrong. Amina attacked with terrifying speed. Her cavalry struck villages before dawn, while infantry units surrounded escape routes. Enemy supply lines vanished overnight. Within days, resistance collapsed. And after victory, Amina did something no ruler had done before. She ordered massive defensive walls built around conquered territories. Walls of packed earth stretching across cities and settlements. Fortifications so enormous that centuries later, parts of them would still remain. People called them Ganuar Amina, Amina's walls. But those walls were not symbols of protection. They were warnings. Every wall announced the same message. This land belongs to Zazzau now. And more lands would follow. The Hausa kingdoms soon realized a storm was rising across the north. Katsina, Kano, Nupe territories, trading settlements. One after another faced military pressure from Zazzau's expanding empire. Some surrendered without fighting, others resisted. Those kingdoms suffered greatly. Amina understood something many rulers ignored. Trade was power, not just land. Whoever controlled caravan routes controlled wealth. So her campaigns focused heavily on economic domination. She captured strategic territories connected to trans-Saharan trade networks, allowing Zazzau to profit enormously from commerce moving through the region. Gold, leather, salt, weapons, slaves. Everything flowing through northern trade routes increasingly passed beneath her authority. Her empire grew richer, her army grew larger, and her enemies grew terrible. terrified. But Amina herself remained deeply mysterious, because despite her immense power, she never married. In an era when royal marriages secured alliances and strengthened kingdoms, Amina refused every expectation placed upon her. No king possessed her. No husband ruled beside her. No prince inherited her authority. That decision shocked many leaders. Some believed she rejected marriage because she feared losing power. Others claimed no man was worthy of her. But darker rumors spread across the Hausa lands. Stories whispered beside village fires. Stories too frightening to speak loudly. According to legend, Amina sometimes took lovers from conquered territories and had them killed before morning to protect royal secrets. Historians debate whether those stories are true, exaggerated, or entirely mythical. But one thing is certain: fear made legends grow. And by then, fear followed Amina everywhere. As years passed, her military campaigns became even more aggressive. Entire regions paid tribute to Zazzau. Her armies marched farther than many thought possible. And wherever they traveled, the sound came first. War drums, then dust clouds from thousands of marching soldiers, then panic, because people knew what came next. Conquest. One surviving oral account describes villagers abandoning towns the moment scouts announced Amina's approach. Not because battle had begun, but because they believed resistance was hopeless. Imagine the level of terror required for kingdoms to surrender before even seeing your army. That was Amina's reputation. Yet inside the palace walls of Zazzau, another battle quietly unfolded. Age. Years of warfare hardened her body, but even conquerors could not defeat time forever. Scars covered her skin. Her closest commanders had begun dying from war, illness, and exhaustion. Newer soldiers respected her, but they had not survived the early campaigns beside her. And somewhere, deep beneath her iron exterior, isolation slowly grew. Because power had cost her everything else. No family of her own, no husband, no children. Only war, only conquest, only empire. Still, she refused to stop. One season, traders arriving from distant regions carried troubling news. A coalition of rival forces was forming against Zazzau. Smaller kingdoms, exhausted by years of tribute and conquest, were beginning to unite. For the first time in decades, Amina faced the possibility of widespread resistance. Her advisors urged caution. Some recommended diplomacy. Others warned the treasury could not sustain endless campaign rejected retreat. She would crush the rebellion before it fully formed. And so began one of the most dangerous grooming expeditions of her reign. Her pathway into hostile territory. The journey was brutal. Heat-scorched soldiers beneath exact skies. Water became scarce. Disease spread through cocoa at night. Yet Amina pushed forward relentlessly, because weakness threatened empire, and rebellion threatened empire. Then came the ambush.
Enemy forces attacked suddenly from multiple directions. Arrows darkened the sky. Warriors charged from hidden positions, screaming battle cries. Horses panicked. Soldiers fell. Chaos exploded across the battlefield. For perhaps the first time in years, Amina's forces were caught completely off guard. One commander reportedly begged her to retreat. She refused. Instead, she rode directly toward the heaviest fighting, sword raised, armor stained with dust and blood. Her presence alone rallied frightened soldiers, and slowly, brutally, Zazzau regained control. The battle lasted for hours. Bodies covered the earth. By sunset, the coalition forces broke apart and fled. Another victory for Amina, but this one came at terrible cost. Many veteran commanders died that day. Thousands of soldiers never returned home. And although the Queen stood victorious, something had changed. Even legends could bleed. As the years passed, the line between history and myth surrounding Amina grew increasingly blurred. Some stories claim she conquered as far as the Atlantic coast. Others insisted she possessed supernatural protection. Children grew up hearing terrifying tales about the warrior queen who never smiled and never surrendered. Yet historians today separate fact from legend carefully. What remains undeniable is her extraordinary military influence. She expanded Zazzau's territory significantly, strengthened trade dominance, revolutionized defensive architecture through fortified walls, and became one of the most powerful female rulers in African history. But the greatest mystery of all was how her story ended, because no single version agrees. Some oral traditions claim she died during a military campaign. Others say she fell in battle near Atagara. Some insist betrayal caused her downfall, and a few legends claim she simply vanished from history like a spirit returning to the earth. No one knows with certainty, but one story remains especially haunting. According to certain traditions, during her final campaign, Amina sensed death approaching. Her army had travelled deep into unfamiliar territory after reports of rebellion. The battles were harder now. Enemies had adapted to her tactics. The queen herself was aging. Still dangerous, still feared, but mortal. One night before battle, witnesses claimed they saw Amina standing alone outside camp, staring into darkness for hours without speaking. No guards beside her, no advisors, only silence. Perhaps she knew the empire she built through blood could not last forever, because every empire eventually faces the same truth. Conquest creates enemies faster than peace, and fear alone cannot rule forever. The next morning, battle erupted, and somewhere within the chaos of clashing steel, dust, screaming horses, and dying soldiers, the legend disappeared. When news of Amina's death reached Zazzau, shock swept through the kingdom. For decades, many people believed she was invincible, a force of nature, not human. Now suddenly, she was gone. But death could not erase her impact. The walls remained, the trade routes remained, the empire remained, and the stories. The stories became immortal. Generations passed, empires rose and fell. Colonial powers arrived centuries later and reshaped Africa forever. Yet across northern Nigeria, the name Amina survived. Not because she fit neatly into history, but because she shattered expectations. In a world dominated by male rulers, she commanded armies, expanded territories, controlled trade, and built one of the region's most formidable military legacies. To some, she was a hero. To others, a ruthless conqueror. Perhaps she was both, because history's greatest rulers are rarely simple. Even today, remnants of ancient earthworks associated with her legacy still stand in parts of Nigeria, silent scars across the land. Proof that behind every legend, there was once a real woman riding into battle beneath the burning African sun. A woman who chose war over comfort, power over tradition, fear over submission, and whose name became larger than death itself. Queen Amina of Zazzau, the female king,
the warrior queen, the conqueror of Zazzau, and perhaps the most feared woman in African history.